Hi, welcome to this REP video. This video is about client and group note taking. The actual session is finished, but your job is not yet done. Before you leave the room, it's important that you just take time to record something of what has actually occurred in the group. This video is going to look at some tips around client note taking, group session reporting, also what to do if your documents are subpoenaed, and also to look at situations which actually may be difficult that you're wanting to let others know about because the risks have changed and a negative situation's occurred for a client. How do you make a report about that using RMSS?
So when we talk about case notes, we talk about two different types of case notes. The first one being client notes written immediately after the group session and each group session. And the second one being incidental notes regarding client services provided in between group sessions. Incidental case notes may include any interaction or service provision to the client in between sessions, group sessions. So where there is a conversation with a client, where there is a conversation with another service, where there's a case discussion, all those things should be included into the incidental case note. When we talk about case notes, there are four main principles. The first one is to keep those notes brief. The second one is to keep those notes relevant. The third one is to document any risk issues that have arisen in the group. And the last principle is that changes to the case plan or any actions or interventions taken by the clinicians are documented.
So as Andrew said, after the group has actually finished, we want to take the opportunity to record what's happened in the group as quickly as possible while it's clear in our memories. So generally we suggest that the two group facilitators grab a cup of tea, coffee, sit down, and for the next 30 minutes, sometimes even a little bit longer, you'll be able to grab your client session notes, your group session notes, and start to record the details of what's actually happened in the group, as well as specific issues relating to individuals. The aim is to do that straight after the group. If for some reason one of the members had to leave and neither party could document anything on the night, we do have a provision within the procedures that note taking can be done within 2 days, but we do strongly recommend, unless those emergency type situations occur, that we take advantage of doing it immediately after the group. So the important question is, what makes a good case note or recording of client issues? A key challenge that we all have is to ensure that we don't allow emotive language to creep into our note-taking. So the objective here is to record what we observe, not what we interpret. So the challenge here is to ensure that we are able to document things that are happening in the group that are clearly evident. And then that way we won't get into the issue of, well, that's what you have as a perspective or as an opinion, but rather it's actually what's occurred in the group. Another challenge that occasionally pops up in a group is where you will have multiple people having the same first name. So it's important, of course, that we identify these people by perhaps listing their first initial. We don't want to put their surname, but we put maybe their first initial or some other identifying feature, so that way not only the group facilitators but also the clinical supervisor and admin are also aware of who you're actually referring to. Now, another important component of note-taking is how we collaborate after the session in the information that we're putting down on paper. Best practice would encourage us to be very collaborative in the way that we record our notes. The two key processes after the group is finished are the client session notes and the group session notes. And ideally, it would be good to do them individually, one person scribing and discussing together issues that have occurred in the group and challenges and highlights and so forth. Sometimes we do understand due to time restrictions that you may want to speed that up and assign the group session notes to one person and the client session notes to the other. That's fine, but just ensure that after those notes are recorded, that you both discuss what's been written to ensure that it is a collaborative process and that we're not individually recording just what we feel has occurred in the group.
As the practice specialist for casework, talking about case notes and the importance of writing and recording and storing case notes is highly important. Often we may receive a subpoena, which is a legal document that requires Relationships Australia staff to comply with that document and that request. That request may come from the court, it may come from victim services, it may come from a number of areas, but again the main issue is that we need to comply if this is an official document. The first thing that workers need to consider is the person on the subpoena a client that you're servicing or has been your own client. This is something that it's really important to talk to your team leader and also your manager. Both of those people have important roles in supporting you in complying with the subpoena document. So some of the things that you need to think about are, is there a court seal that's coming on the subpoena? If not, you need to talk with your manager and contact the court or the person who's requested the information to check whether this is a valid subpoena or not. So also, as I said, checking the name of the person. It may not be your client, but it may be another client of an RA program, or it may be a person who's being offered a service by a number of programs, so managers need to coordinate the compliance of information. A subpoena may ask for a person to supply information, or it may be for a document to be supplied, or it may be both. So it's really important to first check the whole document, read that and look at what they're asking for. There are times where there may be information that's recorded on your notes that is about other people. And so we don't need to send that information, so that can be redacted. And the person who needs to be able to redact that is you and your team leader in consultation with your manager. Admin staff don't do that part of the role. So it's often looking at all the documents that are being requested and being able to comply with that. So thinking about other requests that may come in, it may be a 16A request under Keep Them Safe legislation. We can also comply with that, also a search warrant. So again, having a discussion with your team leader and manager about how that compliance actually happens. Managers have a form that they need to register, so every subpoena that comes into the organisation needs to be registered, and so that process is thorough and we can ensure that that compliance happens. There's also a fee that is required that needs to be paid. At the moment that's $110. If that full amount hasn't been included with a subpoena, then we can invoice, and again that's a job for the manager to take control of. So again, that important information is crucial. So in the group work context, it's really important for us to acknowledge that many of the staff are casual staff and may not be in contact directly with the team leader or a manager on a regular basis. So again, it's important that you do contact the team leader and the manager to discuss any request for information. Often staff find that they may have an informal request. and they may think that it's a subpoena or an official request. But again, if it doesn't have that seal on that document from the court, it's not an official request from the court. Often workers may find a legal representative, so a person's lawyer or an independent children's lawyer may contact them asking for information. It's important that we don't share information over the phone or send documents that haven't been part of that subpoena document situation that's been actually verified and documented. Also, what we try to do as much as possible is contact the client to see if they are aware that their information has been subpoenaed. And this means that we try to contact them by phone if possible, in person if we're seeing them in the group, or at least by email. And again, being able to document that we've tried to contact people, and again to just inform them and have that whole process to be transparent.
Now let's look at a good example of client session notes. One of the things that you'll notice in a good set of notes is that the actual group leaders actually record what is observed and what the client stated rather than interpreting what they said. So when a client presents in a particular way, you may actually say that Helen stated that she had had a difficult week, or Helen was tearful and emotional in the group today. It's important that when there is a situation that concerns you, so using an example of Helen, that she was concerned that her partner had been very angry towards her during the week, that you would record that in your notes, but then you also record, I checked out her level of fear and if she felt safe and what her response was. And if there is any concern that's continuing, that you follow up with that with your in making notes, and as well with the team leader in passing that information on. One of the things which also occurs, if the client is absent, you would actually include any information around that absence. You may find that information's being passed to you, that she rang the office, so you would just briefly record that Helen rang the office and left a message that she could not attend for whatever reason stated. So again, as previously what Michael said, check in with both of the group leaders that the notes have been recorded, are a mutual agreement that this is the perceptions that you both have of what the changes have been for that client and what have been the key issues they have experienced in this session. Looking at a poor example of client session notes, it tends to be that they make judgments. That she had a difficult week, but it did not actually say what that difficulty was. Or it may be that the group leaders actually just say that Helen is insightful, but there's no detail about what insightful means. It may be that there's been a few sessions that she's been absent for, but there's no detail about any follow-up or discussion or what has been said about that. So it's important to make sure that when you are recording your notes, avoid making judgments and to remember those basic principles of really trying to use observations and being clear of who said what to whom, and making sure that your notes indicate that. When negative changes occur for any of our clients, it's important that this is documented, as well as that information is passed on to your team leader. It is quite often that these reports are put into what we call the RMSS system at Relationships Australia, which is our risk management system. In that report, if as a casual, your team leader will need to know the specific details of what was said by whom, to who, what was the context, and what were the things which you actually said back in trying to understand the risks involved. If it was an issue like suicidality and checking out what that level of suicidality is, and have they actually had any plans on acting upon that intention, is really important information to have a private discussion about with the client. All of this needs to just be given to the team leader, be it either verbally or by email is the preferred option within the actual next 24 hours, so that someone can follow up with that the next day if a group is in the evening, or that afternoon if a group is in the morning, in being able to continue to support that client. In the risk management system, RMSS will send an automatic message to the practice specialist, to the manager of the centre, and also to the team leader. It also makes sure that the actual risks are apparent to others within Relationships Australia, and also the broad details will be registered on reports that actually go to the board. Don't be afraid of RMSS reports. It's actually a really important part of our work, is that we can clearly identify and document the risks that we work with in our clients' lives. So if there's anything that you feel that you're carrying, don't carry it alone. Make sure you talk to others about it. Make sure that that report is put into RMSS.
So we'd now like to talk about group session notes. And the first thing that will come up on this documentation is about the group themes that are present. And we tend to categorise these as both covert and overt themes that are occurring. And essentially they're just fancy terms for some patterns that are developing or that you're seeing present in the group. So an example of a overt theme might be that an overt basically means something that's quite open and it's very clear and it's present. It could be the blaming of their partners for their current circumstances, and you're noticing the aggression and the frustration from clients in the group. Another one could be anger towards the family courts, and again that theme or that pattern is developing because of some of the discussions that have occurred throughout the night. So those examples would be very clear and present because of what you're seeing in the session. A covert theme would be something that seems to be present but not necessarily specifically identified in the session. So an example of a covert theme could be that there is a developing and a building of trust and safety within the group. And that would be a pattern that you're starting to see becoming more cohesive. The next question will be what helpful, unhelpful group dynamics are present in the session. So some examples of that could be issues of collusion that are developing. It could be about a critical pattern of behaviour that's surfacing in the session often. It could be towards partners, could be against police, family court. Could also be, some of those dynamics might be about alliances that have been developed between individuals. So, Jack and Stephen are forming a really close connection. Or it could be the opposite, that Jack and Stephen seem to have some conflict with each other and tend to be quite disruptive or argumentative in their comments. So there's some group dynamics that might be worth noting in your documentation, so that again you're starting to understand what sort of issues or challenges might be present. But also it's good to highlight some of the positive aspects of group dynamics. So the fact that it might be very honest, that the group is becoming very honest in their disclosures, in difference to the first couple of sessions. Their level of safety and support towards each other is also being noted. And even issues of body language might even be quite clear and visible in the way that people are presenting in being more engaged and more interactive in the way that they're operating within the group. So next we have the stages of group development, and we often refer to Tuckman the model that we are quite familiar with, the forming, storming, norming, performing, mourning stages. It's a good model in the sense that it helps us to be really clear as to where we could even label the group on that particular session. And it might be that they are performing really well, and you might just give an example or two of why you've indicated that particular stage of development. And again, if it was a mourning stage, it might be because somebody's actually left the group. I remember a few years back we had somebody who had died via suicide, and that was quite a distressful and challenging session that we had. So we definitely noted that it was a mourning stage of development, purely because of that dynamic that occurred and interrupted the group mid-program. So a mourning issue doesn't necessarily have to occur just at the end of the group. The next issue is about program issues. And what we're referring to there is that if you and your co-leader have identified some things that worked really well in the session, definitely it's good to get that feedback and just note it. It might be that you did a particular activity and you just found that you clicked with it, that the group clicked with it, and that there was some really good work that occurred from it, maybe even in difference to what has previously occurred in other sessions or other programs. So definitely note that, because that reinforces strengths-based perspective, what is actually working really well. But of course we also want to know the things that aren't working well. And that might relate to a video that just didn't seem to connect with the audience or with the group. It could be about an activity. It could even be a process that you applied directly from the manual that just didn't seem to work. So please be specific so that we can make those adjustments and review the viability or the relevance of those particular activities or resources for that program. Another very important aspect to our note-taking is taking advantage of how our co-leadership and leadership operated in the session. So that might be about some personal disclosure for yourself in something that you found you didn't perform particularly well on, and just making a little note, not to go into too much detail of course, but just so that it might be something useful that you could bring to supervision, or even just to raise with your co-leader, understanding that we are human, we are going to make mistakes, and just being able to be very open and candid about some of those challenges. It might also be just that there was some interaction with our co-leader on that particular session that didn't work well, that we didn't read each other very well. And that could have been due to just absence of mind, it could have been our seating position, it could have been about our preferences or even our bias towards certain clients in the group. One of us might be a little bit more lenient with a client, whereas another person might be doing a lot more containing of that client. And so we find that when we debrief at the end of the session, that we need to talk about sharing the load relating to containing a client, so that it's not coming across that just one leader is continually pulling up this particular client. So they're just a couple of examples of co-leadership challenges that we might like to explore and document. And then finally, that relates very much to our supervision. So incorporating some of that co-leadership dynamic into what we would like to discuss in our supervision session. So one of the things that we love about Relationships Australia is the fact that supervision is an integral and it's an imperative part of the work that we do that we really appreciate. I know as a group leader, that is something that I've always admired and taken advantage of. And so can we encourage you to use the time together to note anything that you feel would be worthy of discussing in supervision. And that's also a respectful thing to do. rather than just turning up at supervision and bringing up an issue that your co-leader is totally unaware of. And of course that may occur occasionally, but when you do have the opportunity to identify something that's worthy of bringing to supervision, make a note of it so that way you don't forget. Because if you rely on your memory, we can guarantee you that generally people will turn up at supervision and not recall what they really wanted to discuss. So it's really about respecting the process of supervision and doing our due diligence in preparing for that.
Well, we've just actually finished our outline of client and session note-taking. There's a couple of important documents which is you can actually follow up in reading. There's the release of client information procedure. There's also about case note policy and case note procedure, which are all documents within Relationships Australia, which will help to give you a bit more understanding about the important role which the documenting of this journey which we have with our clients is all about. Take care.